Okie dokie. Welcome everybody to Developing Your Dating Instincts, which is a part of my Love Alchemy Masterclass series. We do lots of different workshops, lots of different masterclasses on lots of different topics, all related to dating and relationships and helping you to have the love that you desire and deserve. Let's kick this off. So, if you don't trust your dating instincts 100% of the time, this is the masterclass you need to be in. There is no other masterclass like this, and I'll tell you why in a second. But first, a few of the things that we're going to cover today. I won't read this whole list because everything is going to come up, but we're going to talk about the scientifically proven way to identify your instincts. We're going to look at things like why a person can have an amazing personality and you still not be attracted to them. We're going to look at why certain pieces of dating advice don't work for you and how to determine what will. Also, that includes dating apps because, some people are like, oh, the dating app, I hate them. They don't work. Why some apps do, why some apps don't. And the primary reason that some people tend to move too fast or too slow in relationships. Technically, there are two reasons. So stay tuned to find out what those are. In addition to the other things you see on the screen and a lot of other things you don't see on the screen. This is going to be a very, very, I'll call it interactive masterclass in the sense that your questions will be incorporated into what happens. And as you'll find out, I'm also a master improviser. So sometimes there are things that I didn't necessarily include in the slide presentation, but are going to be additional things that are really, really juicy and applicable to what we talk about. So fasten your safety latches and buckle up because we're going for a ride. Okay. Very good. If you don't know me, here's my bio. Here's some of my receipts, if you will. My name is Amari Ice. In the media, they call me the Prince of Hearts. I wear this little crown. I mean, crowns are also cool, but the primary reason is to remind you that love is supposed to be fun, right? We're all going to be most engaging, most fascinating, most attractive when we're in a state of play. And so this crown is to really remind us all to play more because that is the secret to love. Okay. Yes. Very good. I'm also a lot of other things. A matchmaker, a relationship coach. I'm a hypnotherapist, got a lot of certifications, a lot of degrees. I just like to learn, but I hate school. Fun fact. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me. And we're going to continue to walk. We're going to kick this off with what I call the dating KPIs. And if you work or have experienced like any sort of corporate situation, you probably heard of KPIs in the sense of like key performance indicators. And this isn't that. Okay. New words. We're not talking about those KPIs. But you could say that this is a version of that for dating. So here's what these are. First of all, a little context. When we think about love, we're really talking about an emotion. We're talking about an experience. We're talking about a feeling. Some people call love an action. All that is fine. But ultimately, we're talking about something that we are experiencing or perceiving ourselves, which connects back to our own minds. And there are three parts of the mind, and each one really impacts our experience of love in a different way. So you have the conscious mind, subconscious, and unconscious. And the easiest way to think about this, the conscious mind is your thinking brain, right? This is where reason happens. This is your intelligence, your IQ, your knowledge, your conditioning, right? All of that. And usually we measure this by like your IQ or your degrees or certifications, all those things I just gave you a little bit earlier, my receipts. But in terms of relationships, that K in KPI, this is really your dating knowledge, your dating skills. Okay. We can think about this simply as what we know how to do or not as it relates to dating and relationships. Then we have the feeling part of the brain, the subconscious mind. And so this is, the part of us that really houses our personality, our emotions, and the P in KPI is our preferences. So when you think of all the things you're looking for in a partner, your partnership preferences, your romantic goals, your needs, all those things, okay? So generally, when we're talking about this part of the mind, we're measuring our personality types or our emotional intelligence. But on a relationship level, we're looking at the list. Okay. So to sum this up, and I don't know if you can hear that helicopter, but the people are looking for somebody today. Yes, very good. I'm to sum this part up. This is what we like to do or not, or what we want to do or not. So this is like motivation. This is interest. Okay. That feeling part of the brain. And then the third part of the brain is the unconscious, the doing part of the mind. And there's a very fun word that a lot of people haven't heard of, but it's just as old as cognitive and affective. It's called conative. Okay, so we think cognition, affection, and then conation. That is the part of us that actually takes action. So this is the part of the brain that's responsible for our instincts, for our drive, for the force that moves us to accomplish any goal, any task, any desire that we have. Okay. And in general, we measure this with what we call our MO, your modus operandi, your operating system, if you will. And romantically, this is the I, specifically the dating instincts. Okay. The I and KPI. So if the conscious mind is what we know how to do or not, the subconscious mind is what we want to do or like to do or not. This part is what we will or won't do. Okay. And that is going to be very important in a few slides, what we will and won't do. So when we think of these three parts of the mind, sometimes they all work together, right? When you think of being in alignment, or I don't know if you've heard of like manifestation, you're familiar with that, but when your thoughts, your emotions, your actions are all aligned, what you want to manifest is inevitable, right? Like if I know what I'm doing, if I want to do it and I'm actually doing it, it's kind of impossible for me to not get what I've committed to create or manifest. But other times, friends don't be friends, okay? And the different parts of our brain, of our mind can contradict each other. So you can think of the instincts as like the innate part of us that doesn't change, right? However, we all can learn through a conscious mind how to do something in a way that overrides our instincts, right? We can get conditioned to believe certain things that makes us act against our own grain. Or you can not know how to do something even if you want to do it, so you won't be able to do it well. You can know how to do something. I know how to take out the trash, but do I want to take out the trash? So am I going to take out the trash? It depends, right? So the three parts of the brain, the three parts of the mind, whenever we are looking to do anything, we have to consider all the parts. And this is also true with romantic compatibility. When we're looking for a partner, we need to consider what their goals are, right? What their intentions, what their romantic preferences and needs are, their personality, what their MO is, how they operate, what their experiences are, right? All those things are really important. And if we only focus on one thing, like, oh, he's cute, like you're leaving out the other two parts that are just as important, right? So it's given us this big picture understanding of what we need to really consider as we seek to move into a relationship with someone else, but also just on our own as it applies to everything else in our lives. So let's put this all together, right? So I mentioned I do a whole lot of different master classes on a whole lot of different things. And sometimes these are going to cover one part of the brain or not. So for example, I do a master class on how to attract love in 90 days, right? Very fun. Stay on the lookout for that if you haven't been to that yet. One of my other huge master classes is how to slay the emotionally unavailable man dragon, and also really juicy. But today we're focused on the dating instincts, as you know, because you signed up for that, unless somebody else registered on your behalf, in which case, welcome and surprise. So let's get into this. Why is this masterclass even important? There are two key things that I want to share with you here. One is relationship oriented, and then the other is relationship and everything else oriented. So first of all, when you think of being in a relationship, the number one reason that any relationship is going to fail is not infidelity or money. It's the frustration we experience as a result of our unmet expectations around what our partners will and won't do. Remember that will and won't do from earlier? So you're like, oh, my partner should cook and clean all the time. But if you get a partner and they're not doing that, you're not necessarily going to be satisfied if you can't shift that expectation or if they can't meet the expectation, right? The other piece of that, though, is 90 to 95% of all illness we know is related to stress. And the things that stress us out most are often when we're taking action against our instincts. So if you can identify what your instincts are, you can do two things. You can predict what you will and won't do, what someone else will and won't do, and you can also arrange or rearrange your life to be less stressful for you. So this actually happened for me. Excuse me, I encountered what we're going to talk about today, this assessment that allows you to measure your instincts in like 2018. My mentor had me do it. And since then, like I've kind of rearranged my whole business to be in alignment with the way my instincts work. Much less stress, much more ease, much more fun. When we think about flow and those different parts of the mind, flow is not a conscious mind thing. It's a subconscious and unconscious part of us, right? You know how you like sometimes fall into flow, or you're driving on autopilot, or you lose track of time reading a book or cooking or watching a show or having sex, right? Anytime we fall into that space where we lose track of time, we're in a state of flow. And that is a result of our instincts and our subconscious programming and emotions, okay? So if we can find flow, we're in a lot less stress. And what we're going to talk about tonight is going to help you to navigate both of these situations: the frustration in relationships and the frustration at work and at home. Okay. All things. Now, I mentioned a little bit about the expectations versus what our partners really won't do, right? If they don't operate the way we want them to, if they don't move the way we expect a partner to move, it's going to be hard for us to be satisfied in the relationships until either our expectations change or the partner changes. And so identifying your expectations is key. A lot of times people don't realize what they expect of a partner, right? A lot of times we don't have the language perhaps to communicate what we want and what we need in a way that our partner can understand. And so what we're going to talk about tonight really gives you that language in a way that you'll then be able to navigate those conversations a lot more productively. Cool? Cool. And I mentioned that this allows us to predict how our partners, how we will act with over 90% accuracy. Okay. So this is not like, it's not like a personality test, right? Different part of the brain. Personality tests are more like what we like, but they don't necessarily tell you what you're going to do, right? This is going to tell us what we're actually going to do or not and how we're going to do it. And so we call these instincts the striving instincts. And so they activate whenever we are trying to solve a problem or create or accomplish any particular type of task or goal, whether that's personal, professional, or otherwise. And when we apply these instincts to dating, I call them the dating instincts. Okay. Any sort of application of our instincts in the romantic environment, I call it a dating instinct. And so they're going to impact pretty much every single thing we do as it relates to relationships. So from the way we communicate, to the way we manage money, to the way we do chores, or as I like to say, make the sex, how we plan vacations, and also how we date, right? The dating plan that's going to work best for us or not, the whether that's being an app or working with a matchmaker or just whatever we do, it's going to help us to really drill down on the process that will work best for us for accomplishing whatever goal we have in a romantic context or otherwise. So I mentioned that there is one tool that is currently scientifically validated and reliable that allows you to measure this, and it's called the Kolbe Index. So I'm going to give you like a little introduction to how it all works, and then we're going to talk more about how we apply that to dating. Okay. Let me move y'all's video out the way so I can see these words. Very good. Okay. So let's talk about the instincts. There are 4 instincts altogether. First, we have the instinct to probe, as in dig for information, how many questions we ask, how deep we go. Then we have the instinct to organize, so how we deal with plans and processes and structure. We have the instinct to innovate, which is how likely we are to experiment or improvise when we're faced with unfamiliar situations. And then the instinct to demonstrate, which is how we show what we mean, how we communicate either abstractly or concretely. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of these, but that's just a quick little brief, okay? The 4 instincts. So first, the probing instinct is going to tell us the extent to which we're going to do things based on our previous experience, okay? Based on data, based on things that have already happened. It tells us how we deal with facts, with figures, with details. And some of us are going to be really general, like we just get the gist of things. And some of us are going to be highly specific and get as much detail as possible. Then with the instinct to organize, some of us are going to be highly systematic and do things one at a time until the thing is complete before we move on to something else. And if we don't, that will stress us out. At the opposite end, some of us are going to be very like multitasking and need to switch tasks pretty regularly or quickly in order to be productive. So in other words, some people are going to actually be much more effective at getting things done when they do multiple things or move in between things versus trying to do one thing at a time. And if you're that type of person, you know how much it stresses you out to have to focus on one thing at a time. But we'll get into some productivity hacks if you want a little later. So again, this is how we deal with plans, with processes, with procedures, with organization, with patterns. You can even think of this in terms of design, like graphic design, how we lay out colors, how we organize things on a page, in addition to how we store and sort information. The instinct to innovate is going to tell us how much novelty we need, how much variety we need. Essentially, do we get bored with things being the same way all the time? Or are we more comfortable with things being consistent and preserving the status quo? So this is how likely we are to improvise when we don't know the outcome of a situation and how we're going to deal with risk, how we're going to deal with uncertainty, how we're going to deal with ambiguity. And for each of these instincts, it's not, do we use the instinct or not? Because all of us have all 4 of the instincts, but where we fall within the spectrum, which we'll talk about in just a bit, tells us the way that we utilize the instinct naturally. And finally, we have the instinct to demonstrate. And so this is how much we need to do things with our own hands. And so you can think of this as not, we're going to call this as implementer. You'll see that later, but not implement like executing a plan, but implement as in the tool. Like if you go to the dentist and there's a lot of tools laid out on the table, they call those implements. And so this is the instinct to like build or construct or use tools and technology or even our own bodies to manipulate the physical world around us. Okay. And so these instincts, while they exist, they're all internal. We can't look at your instinct, right? You can't just like watch me and be like, oh, this instinct is happening. However, all of the instincts produce specific measurable behaviors. And so that is what we actually will measure. And we call these measurements of the instincts action mode. So each instinct has its own action mode. So the instinct to probe is what we call fact finder. The instinct to organize is what we call follow through. And again, this is not do you follow through or not, but how you naturally follow through. The instinct to innovate is called quick start. And then the instinct to demonstrate is called implementer. And so within each instinct, within each action mode, there are 3 zones of operation. And so you can see this little graphic over here. We will either naturally prevent problems. So you can call this resisting or counteracting the instinct. So for example, the instinct to probe, some of us will initiate probing and some of us will just resist probing. Like we just won't dig into things, right? So we will counteract that instinct and prevent problems through that particular action mode, or we will accommodate the way that others utilize the instinct or need things in that instinct, or we will initiate action through that instinct. And so initiating mean even if nobody asks us, even if there wasn't like something else that prompted you to take the action or initiate the instinct, you're gonna do it. Okay. So let's look at this a little more in detail for each of the 4 instincts. So with fact finder, which again is the instinct to probe, if we're a 1, 2, or 3 on that scale, this is a scale of technically 0 to 10, but the lowest you can have in any of the instincts is just 1. Lowest meaning how much of what number we use. So If you're a 1, 2, or 3 in fact finder, you're going to resist probing and only get the gist of a situation to make a decision. You don't need a lot of facts, a lot of details. It's very much like, just give me the bottom line and I can tell you yes or no based on that. If we're a 4, 5, or 6, we're going to get the essentials. So all the essential details, all the essential facts, maybe a couple, 2, 3 supporting details, and then we're comfortable moving on. But also, if someone else needs more information, we will give it to them. If they need less, we'll give them less. So we will naturally accommodate what people need. And if we initiate in that instinct, we're naturally going to get all the facts, figures, and details when needed. Okay. And just to bring this back in, remember that the feeling part of the brain, the subconscious mind, our emotions, our motivation, if we aren't interested or motivated to take action, our instincts won't activate. So this is not saying what you're going to do in every single situation, no matter what. This is when something matters to you, when you are committed to it, when you've decided to solve the problem, to accomplish the task, to tackle it, when that motivation is already provided, this is how you will take the action. Okay. So if you don't care about cars, you're not going to get all the information about cars as pop, like you just don't care. Okay. The motivation is the battery or the fuel for the instinct. So then with follow through, which again is the instinct to organize, if we're at this end of the spectrum, we're going to do things in a more multitasky way, more random. In the middle, we're going to need things to be a little structured, but also a little flexible. So you can think of this like someone who needs a template, right? So you gave me the structure, but I'm going to adjust the template for my purposes. And then if you're 7 through 10, you will initiate plans and processes. You can think of this like, this is the type of person who will procrastinate if they don't have all the pieces to the puzzle to be able to make a plan. Until I have a plan, I'm not going to take action, is essentially what will happen if you're a 7 through 10. Versus if you're 1, 2, or 3, it's like, you gave me a plan, but I don't know where I put it, for example. Or, we're much better at doing things as they need to happen. So think about like an EMT, right? There's an ambulance, there's an emergency. Someone who's a 1, 2, or 3 is going to naturally excel in those emergency situations where you need to act. And then there's not already a plan already created that you have to follow, just as an example. Okay. And then with quick start, which is the instinct to innovate, at the 1, 2, or 3 end, we're naturally going to be stabilizers. We'll maintain the status quo and try to reduce risk as much as possible. If we're a 4, 5, or 6, we're willing to take risks, but we need time to kind of process or adjust to the idea before we jump into it. And then if we're a 7 through 10, we need constant change, variety. We will initiate change. We will consistently generate ideas and experiment and improvise. And then finally with implementer, so the instinct to demonstrate, at a 1, 2, or 3, we're going to be more abstract. So these are going to be the people who are going to, instead of having to see it to believe it, like just tell me, like use words, use concepts to explain it. So a lot of times people who are really into like math or numbers or things like that are usually more 1, 2, or 3 because it's more abstract. If we're a 4, 5, or 6, we will bridge the conceptual in the abstract or the conceptual in the concrete. So you can think of this like an architect would like draw plans. So that's the abstract version, right? Someone who's like the project manager to build the building might be a 4, 5, or 6. They're going to take the plans and translate that to the concrete realm. And then someone who's a 7 through 10 is going to be highly hands-on and need to actually do the doing, right? And that's just one example. So we're not talking about, oh, if you're high in implementer, you're going to be a builder. This can be any field, doesn't matter. This just tells us how we need to do it. So your dentist or your surgeons, your dancers, your athletes, right? Like anybody can have high implementer. This doesn't tell us what you're interested in, like your personality and that area. Well, this just tells us how you need to move based on what you're interested in. And I'll keep saying that because a lot of times we'll bring up, I don't like making plans. Great, then you won't do it, right? But the things you do like, you will do. Okay, so we've covered the 4 instincts / 4 action modes and the 3 operating zones. And 4 times 3 is 12. There are 12 strengths altogether. And you can see that in each of the 3 zones, it's a different strength that a person can have. And all of us has one strength in each of the action modes. So we have 4 strengths altogether. And when we identify what our 4 are, we also know what our MO is. And this is what that looks like. So I'm going to show you this through my MO. So my MO is a 5, 4, 7, 3. And my talents, so for Fact Finder, I'm a 5. I'm right in the middle there. So I'm really good at explaining things. Go figure, right? So I can take complex information and make it easy to understand. For follow through, I'm a 4, so I will naturally maintain a plan or a process unless there's a problem or like an easier way or a simpler way. Like I'll optimize plans and processes, but I'm probably not going to be the person who's like, oh, I'm going to make the plan and do that every single time. So we all can do anything. We can learn how to do things, but when we're free to be ourselves, I'm not going to always make all the plans. In the quick start mode, I'm a 7. So I'm naturally going to be more improvisational. Even though I have slides and everything prepared for you guys, I'm going to go off script. You can bet on it just a little bit, if not a lot. I'm naturally gonna generate ideas and options. It's one of the things that also makes me a really great coach. Like you're never going to be without an idea for what to do or what to try. And then in implementer, I'm a 3. So I'm really good at coming up with, again, because I'm great at ideas, they're going to be more abstract ideas usually. So I might be like, oh, I know what we can do with this space. We can move things around, but am I going to move it around? Maybe not by myself. Okay. So really great at envisioning things. You often don't have to show me the thing in order for me to get it. Like you could just tell me and I'm like, okay, I can see the concept. Cause it's almost like I can see the movie playing in my head whenever you tell me a story. And therefore it's easy for me to see like the gaps in the story because I can see the movie. So just as an example. Now, we all, actually, let me go the opposite way. Yeah. We all also use our instincts in a way that manages our time and energy. So you can kind of think of this. I'll start with the batteries concept. So we looked at my MO, right? 5, 4, 7, 3. And you see these cylinders, you can kind of think of them as batteries. So this tells us how much time and how much energy we can spend utilizing that particular instinct. Okay. So for example, for me, and another thing I'll mention is this also tells us our order of operations, not just the zones. So you always will start action with the highest number. So I'm going to start action and quick start, and then I'm going to go to fact finder, then follow through, then implementer. And I'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's what this is telling us. I start at quick start, then fact finder, then follow through, then implementer. Okay. So in terms of time, I can spend 37% of my time ideating, brainstorming, thinking and talking off the top of my head, right? Before I get tired. Okay. Same with fact finder, 26%. So I can like check facts and details 26% of the time before I get tired. But that's if I'm doing it in my natural zone. So I'm naturally an accommodating fact finder. But if you're like, oh, I need you to do all the research, that will tire me out faster. So I won't be able to spend 26% of my time doing all the research. I'll probably be able to spend like 10% of my time, right? It like uses the battery faster if you go out of the zone. So you can think of it that way. It also tells us how we use time. So each action mode represents a different function of time. Fact finder is the past, okay? I'm going to skip around a little bit on purpose. You'll see why. Fact finder is the past. Quick start is the future, which makes sense because it's the innovating instinct. It's what isn't here yet. Implementer is the present, right? Show me what's here now. And then follow through is how we integrate past, present, and future into a sequence. You can think of follow through as your internal clock, okay? And so that's a quick little gist. You now know more than like 95% of people about how the instincts work, even though you probably don't remember all this stuff. But like just that little introduction, you're professionals at this point. Now, I mentioned that it tells us our order of operations. And we saw that I start in quick start, and then I go to fact finder, then follow through, and then implementer. And so always, no matter what it is, from the time I was little, because these are innate, we're born with these, they don't change over time. Again, you can override your instincts, but your instincts are still there, right? If we say we're all in the same class when we get a paper to do, right? We all have to write a paper. I am always going to start by brainstorming. And so even if the class is like, oh, you need to make an outline first, which is follow through, and then do the research after you made the outline, and then I won't do it. If I try, it will stress me out, and it's always frustrating, right? But I'll start with the ideas. And anywhere you initiate, so any of your 7 through 10s, you're always going to start the problem solving process there, unless there's like a deadline or something else that makes you stop. You don't naturally stop. So I will keep ideating until there's a deadline, which might look like I didn't start writing the paper until the night before. I've been working on it since it got assigned, but every day I came up with a different idea for what I was going to do. That's one way to look at it. Once I've decided on the idea, then I'll do the background and like research and everything else, and then put it into the template that the paper has to be in. And then because it's a paper, there's nothing to build necessarily. So this doesn't necessarily apply there, but pre-made solutions. Maybe I'll look for a template that's already made from somewhere else, right? In the paper example, but it tells us all that information, how we use time, how we take action, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It also tells us how we communicate. And I'll come back to that in the next section. So again, I'll invite you, if you have questions at all, to post them in the chat, and I'll answer them as we can. But in the meantime, let's continue to the next section. So now we get to apply the instincts to dating, right? What does this look like? First things first. When we think of relationship, the foundation of all relationship is relating, right? You can't have a relationship without relating. And in order to relate, we have to communicate. So whether we're already in a committed relationship or we're just dating, communication is central to the entire process from beginning to the next lifetime, right? Like that is what we have to do. So the way that we communicate is a function of all 3 of those parts of the mind. It's what we've learned, right? Some of us have taken classes on how to be better communicators. It's what we feel, because emotion is going to drive what's salient for you to talk about, right? Like we might have this on the agenda, but if something's on your heart right now, sometimes it's hard to not talk about that thing or to do anything else until you've talked about it, right? But when all that is equal, our instincts are going to tell us the way that we communicate or through a few different lenses. So let's take a look at that. With Fact Finder, remember, this is how much information we naturally gather and share when we communicate. So if you're a 7 through 10 on that scale, when you share stories of what happened during your day, you're going to share a lot more specifics than other people will. Or if you have questions, if you don't understand something, you're going to ask a whole lot of questions. The thing to remember, though, if you initiate in any of the action modes, is they all are a standard bell curve. So 20% of people initiate, 20% of people resist, counteract, and 60% of people are in the middle. So if you initiate in Fact Finder, that means 80% of people need less detail than you. 80% of people will naturally share less detail than you. So sometimes as initiating quick starts, we might think people aren't interested or are hiding things, and really they just don't naturally need to give or, probe for as much information. So just be aware that there's nothing wrong with the need that you have. It's just finding a way for everybody to get their needs met. And sometimes I'm going to ask all my questions, but maybe I'll ask 3 of them now and then a few more tomorrow, right? As an example. If you're a 4, 5, or 6, you're naturally going to adjust to the level of specificity that the audience needs. Like it's a bit easier for someone who's in the middle to get when someone understands what they said or when they haven't gotten it yet, because they're like, oh, like the feedback that you gave said that you didn't get this, or it said that you did, right? So one of the things to be aware of, though, if you or someone someone you're talking to is the 4, 5, or 6, is that wherever we accommodate, we're responding to what other people are saying or needing. And so a 4, 5, or 6 won't always initiate the conversation or initiate the questions, but they'll respond and then they'll ask more questions based off of what happened, right? So there's a level of being aware of that adaptability. And so what's really cool, I think I'm going to show you this real quick. This is like one of those off script moments, but it's just so fascinating. So I mentioned how we will accommodate other people in the action mode, right? So I'm a 5. I will accommodate people's needs for facts. Same thing. If you need more structure, okay, more closure, great. If you need less, great. So yeah, we respond to other people, but wherever we have those accommodating modes, we also will respond to where we naturally initiate or resist. So as an example, I naturally initiate ideas. And if I get an idea to then write or to look something up or an idea to make a plan, I will respond to my ideas for that too. It's a little geek out moment. So you're not only at the mercy of other people, you're also at the mercy of where you naturally start the problem solving or creative process. Yeah. So I don't want you to think, oh, I can't talk unless somebody else is talking. No, that's not what this is saying at all. Okay. And then if you're a 1, 2, or 3, remember you're just getting like the brief, the general. You don't naturally probe too deeply. And so this is really important to remember that if you are with someone who is a simplifier in that fact finder area, just because they aren't asking questions doesn't mean they're not interested. Okay. And fact finder is also, let me say this a different way. All the action modes also tell us how we communicate through that mode. Fact finder is the written word. So you can think about it this way: how we text, how we email, right? All of our social media stuff we are doing through that fact finder mode. So some people are naturally just going to write fewer things. I think that Beyonce is probably a 1, 2, or 3. And if you notice, her captions never have any words, or they're always like few words when she writes stuff, right? And then you have other people, every caption they write is always 3 books. And you're like, friend, how do you have the energy, the time? Like, I don't even got that many words, right? So you can often perceive how people are naturally gonna communicate the amount of information they communicate if you just observe that. Now, we are about 50% accurate in predicting what someone's MO is going to be, someone else's. We're only about 33% accurate in predicting our own, which is interesting because we often confuse what we like to do, what we want to do, what we've been trying to make ourselves learn how to do with what we naturally do. Okay. So you're often going to be a little better at predicting someone else's, but the only real way to find out is to just do the Kolbe Index, and then you have that validated, reliable tool. So that's fact finder, written communication, and how much information we're going to gather and share when we're communicating. Follow through is the way that we structure communication. And so this looks like, if you are a 7 through 10, you're going to be someone who tends to want to finish this topic before we move on to another topic, as an example. Okay. And so again, your instincts have nothing to do with your IQ. So this is not saying, oh, you're more logical of a communicator. No. Like logic, reason. And same thing with fact finder. You might gather all the facts, but how you make sense of them is going to be an IQ thing, not an instinct thing. Okay. So just wanted to point that out. But yeah, the 7 through 10 in follow through, you're naturally going to organize information into a list, into a script, into a flowchart, into a spreadsheet, right? So you might have friends who you're like, hey, let's go on a vacation together, and they break out the spreadsheet, and you're like, where did this even come? Like, I thought it was just, maybe you're that friend, right? I'm not that friend. I'm not the friend who's going to make a spreadsheet. I'm the friend who will be like, we probably need a spreadsheet for this. Like, I will be aware of that. Am I going to do it every time? Sometimes. I may or may not accommodate. So in that vein, if you're 4 through 6, you communicate based on the flow of conversation. So you will often finish the important topics, but freely move about others. And you'll notice that I might go off on a tangent, but I'm going to come back to the things that are important, right? And then you will also naturally likely wait for someone else to either initiate the conversation or bring things to closure. So it's just like you're adaptable to wherever the conversation is flowing, not taking into account the motivation, that part of the brain, or, we already determined this is important. We need to talk about this. And so then if you're 1, 2, or 3, these are going to be the people who are more random in the way that they communicate, right? We might start off in one place and end up somewhere different, and we never got back to the other topic, or we're talking and maybe we decided, it's supposed to be a 15-minute conversation. And next thing you know, it's been an hour and a half, and we like, how do we get here? Right. So the beauty of this, though, is that you will often easily adapt to interruptions, and you can turn interruptions into opportunities as well. So my mom is a 3 here, and I will call her and we're talking on the phone, and the next thing I know, like, she's talking to one of my other brothers or sisters, and I didn't even know she stopped talking to me. It's just like fluid and seamless for her, which is really interesting. But for me, I'm like, look, friend, I need you to focus a little bit. But yeah, so that's how that works. It's the structure of our communication with follow through. Now, with quick start, this is really fun because, again, this is how we deal with novelty, with variety, with experimentation. Okay. So whereas someone who's a 1, 2, or 3 and follow through, that structure might randomly move from topic to topic and not need to finish before moving to something else, the quick start is not necessarily random in the order as much as we're talking about a thing and, oh my God, that just made me think of something else that's connected, but over here, right? Like something new to add to the conversation, new topics that get brought up, rather than we have 5 topics and we're just going to talk about them out of order, which is what a 1, 2, or 3 and follow through would do. Okay. So random is follow through, new, fresh, variety, spontaneous, off the cuff is what you can think of when it comes to quick start. And because all of us sometimes have to have conversations where we don't know what the outcome is going to be, it's an uncomfortable conversation, it's, something we didn't expect, that is when the quick start action mode kicks in, because we all have to deal with risk and uncertainty, but this tells us how we deal with it. So I'm a 7, so I'm naturally just gonna in the moment just kind of respond to whatever's happening, right? Like I'll be able to just wing it, right? If you're a 4, 5, or 6, you will play off of what others say a lot more. So you might not necessarily instigate a new topic, but if someone else brings up something, you'd be like, you know what? Speaking of the price of tea in China, like you'll naturally segue based on those things. And also quick start is speed, right? How quickly we move. And so if you are a 4, 5, or 6 here, you naturally adjust to the pace of other people's communication style as well. And then if you're a 1, 2, 3, you're going to be a bit more measured or cautious or reserved about talking about the future or things that are unknown. So you can think about this like a good example. I'm someone who we can just have a lot of hypothetical conversations, which is a function of my high quick start and my envisioning implementer, right? A little abstract, like just hypothetically 5 years from now, what do you want to do? If you're a 1, 2, and 3 in quick start, you might not naturally bring up, oh, let's just hypothetically think about something that doesn't matter, right? Like if it's something that's important, sure, but I might just bring up hypotheticals just because it's fun, right? So 1, 2, and 3s will generally try to delay or minimize any uncomfortable or risky conversations. And so when we're thinking about this through the lens of the dating process, what does this mean? What are we really talking about? You just meet someone new. It's an uncertain situation. Whenever you're dating, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, how the connection or lack of connection is going to turn out. So all of us are going to really be relying a lot on that quick start action mode when we're just getting to know someone new. And so someone who's a 7 through 10 is usually going to be a bit less, it won't stress them out as much to have conversations with new people or random, like you're in an elevator and somebody just starts talking, it won't be as stressful. Do you like it or not? Who knows? Maybe you don't like it, but it won't stress you out, even if whether you like it or not, it won't stress you out in the doing of it, right? Whereas if you're a 1, 2, or 3, it can be a little more stressful meeting new people and conversing with new people, because The risk aversion here is really about protecting our interests, maybe being a little more guarded. And so what I really want to say here is that someone who is guarded or reserved is not necessarily emotionally unavailable or went through a traumatic experience. Sometimes the reservation is because they just need more time to feel safe and comfortable, right? And so we have to be aware of how we attribute people's behavior. If we're saying, oh, just because you're, not as excitable or you're not ready to jump in right now, doesn't mean you don't like me, doesn't mean you're not interested. And so one of the ways you can tell the difference between someone who's emotionally unavailable and that's why they're dragging things out versus someone who's just more risk averse and needs more time is just ask them what their intentions are, what their interest is, right? Because someone who's a 1, 2, or 3 in quick start will tell you, I'm interested in you. I do want to keep getting to know you. It's just going to take me a little while to build trust, right? They'll be clear. Whereas emotional unavailability, they're not going to have the emotional awareness to tell you that there even is a boundary that needs to be observed, right? It'll be unclear. You'll be like, what are we doing? And they just won't ever answer the question. And it'll feel like, do you like me or not? Are we here or not? Like, what's happening? You won't necessarily know the intentions because emotional unavailability breeds a lack of clarity around intention. Okay. So that's the distinction. Someone who's just reserved will still tell you what their intentions are, but they'll also tell you, I just need more time before I feel like I know what I'm doing here. Okay. So you can think of it like when you start a new job and you have that orientation period, what is it called? The probation period, the first 90 days, just to kind of get comfortable and see, do I even like this? Like, yeah, look good on paper, but now I'm here. How does it actually feel for me? You can kind of think about that period as like designed for all of us, but especially the 1, 2, and 3 in quick start who's like, I need a little time to get used to this. And on the other side, your 7 through 10s, while they will be spontaneous and improvisational and will be like, oh yeah, it's a hell yes or a hell no for me, like I'm all in. Over time, they'll still get more clear if it's actually a yes. And so they might be like, oh, I'm actually all out. I'm glad I jumped in the experience to find out, but now I need to go. So that probationary period works for all of us, to be fair. And then finally, we have implementer, right? And so this is, again, how we show what we mean. If you initiate an implementer, if you're a 7 through 10, you're going to communicate a lot more through physical demonstration. So this is very much like, I can show you better than I can tell you, right? We're going to use body language more than words, right? If I initiate an implementer, I might not be a person of many words, especially if I'm also a 1, 2, 3 and fact finder, right? I might not ask a lot of questions. I might not say a lot if I'm also not high in quick start. But if I'm high implementer, my presence is speaking, right? The whole actions speak louder than words piece, okay? And so this is another thing that comes up a lot in dating. Sometimes we are like, why won't you just talk to me, right? Like I feel like I don't know what's going on. And that could be a function of a few different things. Maybe they're an introvert, so they're naturally more, reserved and laid back. They're 1, 2, 3 and quick start, so that adds another level of cautiousness. And they're also high in implementer. So they're just it's easier for me to communicate by like building you the thing or like, look, I built the fence, or maybe physical touch or something like that, right? So all of our styles are valid and there's nothing wrong with either. But if we don't understand this is just a difference in the way that we communicate, not a problem in the way that we communicate, it's easier for us to give people grace and also not be as frustrated or take things as personally. Okay. So if we're a 4, 5, or 6, we will accommodate physical needs, right? So we'll use, again, both the concepts and the physical demonstrations. We'll respond to whatever the other person needs. Like if you're more of a hands-on person, okay, I'm going to show you that. If you're more of a concepts person, cool, we can talk in concepts, right? So there's a bit more translation that happens in expressing what you mean there. And then if you're a 1, 2, or 3, you're naturally going to communicate through words or ideas or concepts more easily. So though I can put some blocks together and be like, oh, look, I made a building, I'm more likely to just tell you. Okay. So the other thing about this is if you're 1, 2, or 3, you will usually rely on the other action modes to express yourself and show what you mean. In other words, like You might be more tuned into the past if you're hiring a fact finder, or the future if you're hiring a quick start like me, or maybe you are the type of person who's like, hey, like I'm gonna just put a plan together, I'm gonna just like make some stuff happen, right? So we have to look at all four of the action modes together. That'll really give us the best picture of how a person communicates. So just giving you that piece of clarity again, and then I'll take a little break and see if there are questions using this for me. So I'm naturally going to communicate most easily through the spoken word. My first instinct is to just talk. When I'm stressed, I just need to talk first, right? Can I write? Yeah, I can write. I'm a really great writer. If you read some of my stuff, you read my first best-selling book, like people love the way I write. Great, but I'm going to talk first. Even though I can write, it's not my first instinct. I will write if I have to. I'd rather just talk. Okay. But I can do it, and I will. I'll give you words. I'll ask questions. I'll send you a couple texts. Might even do a long text every once in a while, but not consistently, right? Our conversation is going to flow. It's going to be open-ended, but also we're going to get important things discussed. And I'm going to use a lot of analogies. I'm going to use a lot of similes. I'm going to use a lot of metaphors, right? I'm not gonna necessarily be like, oh, let me get props and I'm showing you all this stuff with action figures. I'm just not necessarily gonna do that. Okay. So it's like the gist of how it all works together. Now, let's look at the Q&A portions. So I see that there's a question that got asked. First of all, I'm assuming that these change over time with experience and age. Great question. And the answer is no, your instincts don't change over time. Okay. So even as a little kid, I still was always, like, it was easier for me to talk. I always had a lot of ideas. I was always the person that like I could sell anything I believed in. If I don't believe in it, I can't sell it. But like I was always really convincing with the ideas that I had, because I have both the high quick start and the medium fact finder. So I had an idea and I could back it up with enough information that you'd be like, oh, okay, got it. Right. So that doesn't change, but your education changes, your experience changes, the skills you develop, right? All that changes. And again, you can override your natural instincts based on what you learn, based on your conditioning, based on your level of motivation. So it's not that other things about you don't change, but if you are learning skills and, you know, going through experiences that are conditioning you to act against your instinct, you will stress yourself out no matter what. So even though you can go against the grain, you can go against the instinct, it will still be stressful. So all of us can also get used to the stress. And we probably all know someone who for a long time, they've just been stressed. They go to the same job that they don't like. They do the work that doesn't fulfill them, right? It gets on their nerves, but they're still doing it. Just because something goes against your instincts doesn't mean you'll stop doing it unless, you know, other things are in place too, unless you have the motivation, the will, the belief that you can, right? There are lots of reasons why we'll go against our instincts or not allow ourselves to go with our instincts, but the instincts themselves don't change. And so because of that, if we can identify them and then see the ways that we're acting against them and make the decision to shift our environment, to shift the process, to shift the way that we show up, things can be less stressful for us. And I don't want to give the impression that your instincts mean that you can or can't do something. That's not what they mean at all. And in terms of outcomes, this doesn't tell us what outcome we're going to achieve. This tells us the path we're going to take to achieve the outcome, right? So all of us can write a book, regardless of what our fact finder score is. But the higher in fact finder we are, we might do a lot more research. We might write for longer periods of time at once. My first book, I wrote and it started stressing me out. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to write questions down and then answer the questions on audio and transcribe my responses and then edit that. And I did all my chapters in 20 minutes, like 20 minutes each, versus when I was trying to write the first 3 chapters of my first book, I just sat down to write them. It took me like 24 hours for each chapter. And I was like, oh, this is too much. But when I spoke it, I finished it in 20 minutes. Boom. Still got a book, still a great book, because editing is editing no matter what. But the point is, just because you have high fact finder or not, doesn't mean you will or won't write a book, right? It was like, oh, I did it, but I found the way to do it for me that didn't stress me out. And same thing with my second book. This time, I did like a whole course with clients where I taught all the concepts that go in each chapter, and then we transcribed that. So I still did it with my instincts. Cool. Cool. Keep those questions coming. This is great. So here are some of the questions that we got ahead of time that are going to be really fun to talk about. So the first one is, how do I tell the difference between instinct and intuition and fear? Okay. And I love this question so much. It's so juicy. So juicy, in fact, that I need to add a little more juice by taking a sip of water. Stand by. So there's a pretty simple way that we can discern that difference between intuition and fear. And I'll use the analogy of being on a highway. You're driving, right? And say there's an accident a mile or two up. You can't see it, right? So it's far enough away, you can't see it. Fear is going to say, stop, don't go any further. Instinct, intuition is going to say, take the next exit. Okay. So in other words, fear always tells us what not to do. Instinct tells us what to do instead. Right. That's an easy way to think about it. And sometimes they're on the same page. The building is burning. That is a valid fear to have, right? Oh, we're in danger. But instinct is like, get out, right? So there is fear, but there's also instinct. So it's not even that they always are working against each other. You can have both together and they can be telling you to do the same thing. But the challenge is when we want to do something or faced with a decision, but we feel stuck between two choices. That's usually when we have the conflict between fear and intuition, and we have to distinguish, what am I afraid of? What am I trying to avoid? What am I trying to not do? Right? Versus, what do I want to do? What do I feel like doing? What do I know I need to do that would actually accomplish this really easy, but perhaps I'm having some reservation or trepidation around it, right? So again, instinct tells us yes, fear tells us no. And just about everybody who is successful in anything has learned this one valuable thing, and that is feel the fear and do it anyway. Fear is never an indication to stop, because we're actually only born with two fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. All other fears are learned. Okay. Everything else that we're afraid of, we learn to be afraid of it. It's not innate. It's not instinct. It's not intuition. Okay. So unless you're at the top of the building and you look down, you're like, oh, I'm not doing that. That's an instinctual fear response. Okay. Loud noise and you jump, even though you knew the noise was coming. Right. Instinctual fear response. Everything else is learned. Okay. Next question. Why do certain pieces of dating advice never work for me, and how can I tell what will? Okay, this is really fun. So we looked at the fact that the way we handle structure, so let's say follow through, right? Some people are very organized and structured, make a plan, work the plan, don't do anything else until the plan is complete. Other people are more random, go with the flow. If you are, and I'll use a non-dating example first. We all are familiar with like workout goals, right? Why do some people follow the plan that the trainer gives them to the T and other people don't? A lot of that has to do with this. If you give somebody who's a 1, 2, or 3, especially a multi-step complex plan, and you expect them to follow it they're just not going to do it. It's too stressful to do that. But if you give them a plan that has a lot more, like, you get to choose what thing you do. Here are the things, choose the order you do them in, like, go at it. That's going to be a lot more effective for them, right? And same for me, I initiate and quick start. I need variety, I need change. If I have to do the same thing all the time, provided I am a maintainer for plans, so I'll follow the plan, but at a certain point, I need change. I need variety. So there needs to be enough variety in my plan in order for me to be able to follow the plan without being like, I need to do something different because I'm bored now, right? And so if we build that in, I'm more likely to follow the plan. The other thing that works for me, because I love novelty and experimentation, what we do with my trainer, he doesn't even tell me what the plan's going to be. Every single day we do a different workout, right? And I'm just like doing what he tells me to do. and it's happening, but I don't know the plan ahead of time. I just show up, he shows up, and it happens, and I'm working out. And we talk the whole time, which is really fun, right? So it works for me that way. And so with dating advice, the same is true. If you tell somebody who's a 1, 2, or 3 and follow through to follow this 20-step process to find love, is too much. You have to give it to them in a different way. If you tell somebody who's a 7 through 10 in Fact Finder to just do this and don't ask questions, you're setting them up for failure. They have to ask questions, right? And so if there's a piece of dating advice, when you know your MO, if there's dating advice that's telling you to do something, you can always ask yourself, what, if any, MO or strength does this apply to, right? And if some things can apply to any range, right? Everything is not an instinct thing. Sometimes it's a personality thing, right? Like, how do you know who you'll like? Sometimes you just got to feel that, right? And that's not a taking action thing. That's a being aware of what's happening on the inside thing. But the taking action things, it's either, does this fit the way that I would naturally take action, or can I adjust it to the way that I take action? So one of the best examples of this is if you are using a dating app and we're talking about like the profile, if you're a 1, 2, or 3 in Fact Finder and they're telling you need to write 6 pages of detail about yourself, bad advice for you. If you're a 7 through 10 in Fact Finder and they tell you to just write 1 sentence and nothing else, bad advice for you. Okay. So it's being able to look at the suggestion or the requirement and seeing, is this something that flows for me? And an easy way to notice this is just try it out. And if it's stressful when you try it, ask yourself why. Is it because I did it out of order? So maybe it works for your instincts, but the order they told you to do it in goes against your grain. Like my example of having to make the plan first before I deal with the ideas, right? But if I get to do the ideas first and then the plan, it's easier for me to do in that order. So sometimes it's just the order that things need to happen that you need to adjust in order for it to work for you. And sometimes it's this whole piece of advice is just some BS according to the likes of me. Okay. So that's how you just got to look at your MO and compare what's being asked of you to how that fits into your order of operations or not. How do our emotions and romantic conditioning impact our ability to trust our instincts? Whew. How much time y'all got? So this is a really fun one. One of the core things you need to know as a dater is your attachment style. And this is the primary way you connect to people in a romantic sense. Technically, it's how you connect to people, period. But we don't connect in all situations the same way. Meaning, somebody who's a friend, we aren't putting necessarily the same level of expectation or, you know, open-hearted vulnerability and trust and dependence or interdependence on somebody we just got to class with, right? I saw you a couple of times, you cool or whatever, like that's my friend, right? Like it's not as deep of a connection. But when we think of the people that we connect deeply with, our attachment style is always going to show up. And so there's secure attachment styles. About 50% of people are secure. Another 50% are insecure in some form. There's technically 2.5 insecure styles. And this comes up in the How to Slay the Emotionally Unavailable Man-Dragon Masterclass. So I won't reveal too much for the sake of time, but your attachment style forms by the time you're about 3 years old and is based on your relationship with your parents or caretakers growing up. For 70% of us, our attachment style will stay the same throughout our lifetimes. But for the other 30%, there are 3 ways our attachment style can change. 2 for the positive, 1 for the debit. And I'll say that one first. If we go through a traumatic experience, we can go from secure to insecure. So like war or a really significant, like horrible death experience of somebody we were close to and like we were there or something, right? Like different things like that. Those traumatic experiences of loss can make us more insecure as they like shake our emotional foundations of security. But for the positive, the two ways that we can become more secure if we have an insecure style is either through therapy, especially attachment specific related therapy. And so as a hypnotherapist, that's one of my specialties. The other thing is getting into a relationship with someone who has a secure attachment style if yours is insecure. And so in either of those cases, we call that earned attachment. So yes, your emotions can certainly impact your ability to trust your instincts, because if we have an insecure attachment style, we either feel fear, insecurity, anxiety as a result of like believing that we might be abandoned. So fear of abandonment creates anxiety, but also fear of intimacy creates anxiety. And the key word in both of those is fear. And remember, fear and instinct, different, right? So if we are listening more to the fear, we can't hear the instinct, and we will often take action based on what the fear is telling us to do rather than based on what our instincts are telling us to do. So that's like a huge thing. And I would consider your attachment style a function of both romantic conditioning, but also emotions. The other piece of that, though, is your normal everyday emotions can also impact your ability to trust your instincts, specifically fear. Fear is the biggest, but a lot of times we can go through anything that makes us feel an uncomfortable emotion. And if we don't have the emotional skill or dexterity to be able to manage, deal, acknowledge, validate our own emotions and process them in the moment, suppressing or repressing our emotion can also make it hard to hear what the instinct is, because all of our uncomfortable emotions are actually telling us a specific unmet need that we have, right? And if we can't hear the emotion or honor the emotion, we also don't get the need met because we didn't validate what the need was. And our needs and our desires are the things that fuel our instincts to take action. Remember, we talked about that. If there's no motivation, your action modes don't kick in. So if we aren't validating our emotions, we don't then have the ability to get our needs met until the emotions get validated. And so this is true for any of us, but this really impacts men a lot because culturally we get conditioned not to have emotions, right? As little kids, like, don't be sad, don't feel your feelings, like all of that. And it's really interesting that we condition little boys not to be okay with their emotions, but then we suddenly expect grown men to be able to have healthy romantic relationships when emotional connection is at the center of healthy romantic relationships. So one of the things I do with all of my clients is teach them emotional management skills, self-hypnosis, conscious emotional management, like all kinds of things, because if you don't know how to manage the emotions, you can't hear your instincts. If you can't hear the instincts or manage your emotions, good luck with your relationship. It's almost impossible to have a healthy romantic relationship without those two things being in alignment with your intention to have a healthy romantic relationship. So yeah, a little way. Extremely valid point. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Why do some people seem to move too fast or too slow in relationships? I think I answered this a bit, but I'll just reiterate in case I'm just making up that I answered it. But some people, it is emotional unavailability. If I'm not ready, if I'm not available, if I don't have that emotional capacity, we never going nowhere fast. Okay, that's the first piece. And then sometimes things move too fast, but they don't settle because the emotions aren't secure. Okay, so that's one piece. The other thing is if you are at the 1, 2, 3, sometimes even 4 end of quick start, you're just more reserved and you just move a bit slower until you get your bearings. Slow doesn't mean a year. Okay, I'm not saying slow like that. What I mean is in a day or two, maybe not. This doesn't mean that they never will, like, because sometimes you're like, okay, like I'm gonna try it out because I'm going against the instinct, but in general they're just gonna take their time until until it feels like, okay, this is a status quo, right? Because remember, 1, 2s, and 3s in quick start naturally preserve the status quo, and so they tend to need to see you enough for you to become normal in their lives before it feels right for them to be like, oh, you're already here. We're already in a relationship in terms of the way that we interact and navigate. So yeah, it's easy for me to also be all in on that because you've proven the consistency, right? You probably hear that come up a lot. People are like, I just want somebody consistent, right? A lot of times we're talking about that counteracting quick start there. But those are the two main reasons. There could technically be other reasons, like they just don't want to be with you. So like, of course, the relationship isn't going anywhere because they don't want a relationship, but maybe they're just not. Maybe they have their own like shame around letting people down or admitting their own feelings. Like it could be either of those things, but in terms of they clearly like you or are interested, why is it moving too slow? It's usually that. And same on the other end, too fast, right? We often perceive people's speed relative to our own. Okay. So for me as a 7 and quick start, a lot of people, probably 80% of people would be like, oh, like you just when you make a decision, you just be in. Like I moved to Puerto Rico in 2020 and people were like, you just said you wanted to move there. Now you're there. And I'm like, I made the decision. I knew what I wanted. Why wouldn't I go? Like I'm all in when I'm all in, right? So we're just wired the way that we're wired is essentially the response to that. Do our instincts have anything to do with why someone can have an amazing personality and still not be romantically attractive to you? And the short answer is absolutely. So I am going to show you something really cool. So what we've looked at today in terms of the Kolbe Index is called the Kolbe Index, and that tells you your MO. There's some other indexes too. One, because you can use this for hiring. And this is, I think I mentioned, this is like the most accurate predictor of job performance too. So a lot of like the major companies like American Express or the military and NASA use Kolbe to hire because nothing works better at this than determining that. But there's also a Kolbe R for relationships specifically for you to get clear on what your cognitive expectations are of a partner. So what I mean by that, so we talked about the reason relationships fail is like the frustration because of unmet needs about what they will or won't do. When you think of getting into a relationship at first and you really like the person and things are going really well and you're just like obsessed in like the honeymoon phase, that's all personality. Okay. You like their personality and it's fantasy. You also like what you think they're like. Okay. So it's a combination of what you've experienced and also what you're projecting. Most people like the whole getting swept off your feet. What is sweeping you off your feet is you, not the other person. Okay. You're swept in your own illusions. Okay. And so sometimes when we think of like falling in love, you can only fall in love if your normal emotional frequency isn't already in love. Okay. And we usually blame that on the other person. You came into my life and I fell in love with you. And it was like, I had no control over it. But then when I fall out of love with you, it's also your fault. Okay. We tend to not take responsibility when we're living in fantasy, either for the positive things or for the negative things. Okay. So that's the first piece. Honeymoon phase. Once you get beyond the honeymoon phase, when you start to do stuff with the person, maybe you live together, now you're working together and you see how they move in the world, that's when you start to be aware of their MO, right? How they're taking action, how they're getting stuff done, how they do the toilet tissue and whether or not that's compatible with the way you set up the row, right? Like things like that, right? How they manage money. Do they clean up? Are they organized, right? Like all those different things. When the honeymoon phase ends, what people get disappointed by is, oh, but I thought you were going to do all these other things too, and you're not doing those things. Or you did it at first, but now you don't do what you used to do when we first met no more. You know why? It wasn't sustainable. They were going against their grain at first, right? Because if it's sustainable, we keep doing it. We naturally will keep doing the things that are in our grain. So with the Kolbe R, you can identify what those expectations are. So now you can both be clear on the personality bits of compatibility, like what I like in a person in terms of how I feel when I'm with them, but also what I expect them to be like when we're living together and we got to do like real life stuff together. Okay. And the way that this looks, I'm going to show you what mine is. So stand by for the screen share switch. All right. So y'all remember I'm a 5-4-7-3. 5-4-7-3. Your MO does not determine who you are compatible with. Okay, let's start there. Okay, you can have any MO and be with anybody else of any MO. This is different than personality and the other thing, but MO doesn't matter. What does matter is your expectations of a partner's MO. Okay, so these are my expectations. I expect a partner who asks a lot of questions, gets a lot of detail, who is relatively systematic and organized, who is a little more like risk averse and stabilizing and abstract in the way that they express what they mean, right? If someone's MO is within one or two in either side of your expectation, very low potential for conflict, okay? If it's three, it's medium. If it's four or more, high potential for conflict. So what this looks like, if my expectation is a 9, but my partner happens to be a 3, he's an 8, by the way, but that's a different conversation. If my partner happens to be a 3, then that's a big difference in my expectation, right? And I'm going to feel disappointment to the degree of difference between what I'm expecting, often because I don't even know what I expect. I don't have the language or whatever, right? And who the person really is and how they actually operate. And that can be in any of the action modes, okay? But if you don't know this, then you meet somebody and their MO is different and you're like, something ain't right about this. When you can identify your expectations, you then can make that decision. Either I like the person who I'm with and I know that they aren't going to do these things, but I can accept that they're just not going to do it and I can make peace with that, right? Or I can't make peace with this and I just need a new person because I know I can't change their instincts, okay? And so most of the time when we're in a relationship with people, we're trying to solve all the problems, but all the problems in a relationship, one, aren't actually problems, but also all problems aren't solvable. You can't solve a difference in someone's instincts. That's not a solvable problem because it's not a problem. They are who they are, right? The problem wasn't their instinct. It was your expectation in relationship to reality. So again, it is our illusions that get us caught up. Because what's real is the person in front of you is this MO. What's not real is this expectation thing that you're doing that might not even be based on a real person. Sometimes it is. So what I learned is what I expect in a partner very closely matches my grandmother, okay? And my grandmother is like when you think of like being a kid and love, safety is what love is to a kid, okay? And so my grandmother's always been the person who's like, always have my back. There's never been a time where I needed anything and she wasn't there for me. You know what I mean? Like she always had everything covered. And so because she's my template for psychological safety, that means she's my operational template for love too. So if we identify this, and then we can look at who in our family matches this, right? Which of our parents, sometimes it's a combination of the two, okay? If we can identify that, then we can also be like, oh, that's why I'm always attracted to people like that. Because we all have a connect, because again, our attachment styles are based on our parents, but also our cognitive expectations are based on our parents too. It's not always you're like a parent. Sometimes it's the opposite. Okay. So as an example, my mom is a 4-3-7-5. And you can see she's totally different than my expectations. And I usually don't date people like my mom at all. Okay. A part of the reason is since I'm a high quick start and my mom is a high quick start, like there are a lot of times in my life where living with my mom. So she had me when she was 15. Let's start there. But also she's a high quick start and a 3 and follow through. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of adventure. Things weren't always stable, but like I needed more stability. So there's like a, what do you call it? All of our brains do this thing. You can't predict what your brain is going to do when you're 2, right? You kind of just got to wait and see. But what my brain did was say, oh, my grandmother, I feel more safe, right? Subconsciously. Consciously, I'm never in danger with my mom. So it's not that kind of thing. It's just when you're like, oh, I'm hungry. The person who always feeds you every time you say you're hungry, safe, right? Oh, diapers wet. The person who changed, right? Or I got to get picked up from school. Can you come and get me? And if your mom is like, ooh, but I got to work, so we're going to have to find somebody else. But grandma's like, I got you, bro. I'm always there. So it can be all kinds of different things. But when you can identify that, then it's easier to be like, okay, I can see what I expect, who this person is, and how I'm going to reconcile that. Okay. I see a question. Can I ask my question verbally? Because I'm not sure if I can word it right by time. Come on, Cameron. What's your question? We're in the Q&A portion. Go ahead.
Okay. So when it comes to like your instincts,
Mm-hmm.
because the last person I dated about a year or so ago, there were 3 specific instances where I felt like I should have went on about my business. um, but it was kind of like when you were talking about the person being a little bit more reserved in terms of taking time to get kind of more vulnerable and where you are when you're at a certain stage.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it was. And the person was kind of providing that, like, oh no, like saying like what you were saying, like, I want you, I'm interested in you. I don't want to lose, what we were building, what we got going. But in the end, he's the one that switched up and was like, I don't know what it is, but I don't want this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I would have trusted my instincts, I could have avoided a lot of pain. But how can you like I guess I'm asking, like, when you get instincts like that, how can you see through the rest, I guess? Like, how can you like determine, even though he was saying these things, part of me in my mind knew that maybe this is gonna fall apart because maybe he's not all the way over the things that he's dealt with and the traumatic experiences that he's had from his last relationship, and he was still wrapping things up with that and all that jazz. So like, yeah, like I should have trusted my instincts, and even though at times it felt uncomfortable, that reassurance that he provided and still showing up the way that I wanted someone to show up, but not necessarily knowing that, that's what kind of caused me to drop my guards, drop my defense, and become a lot more vulnerable a lot sooner than I probably should have. So how do you? Yeah, I guess I'm asking, like, how do you just know for sure? Or is there no way to know, and you just have to kind of go with it?
That's a great question. So there's a couple layers that you presented, and I'm gonna go to the key ones that are like most salient here. And the first, you mentioned some experiences and unfinished business that he had going on, right? And so remember, we talked about the 3 parts of the mind: thinking, feeling, doing. The thinking part, previous experience, knowledge, skills. When you first meet someone, you're getting that like foundational information. What are your goals? What are your needs? What are you looking for? Are you actually ready for that? Are you ready to trust and care for someone, right? Like that's first base. If you're not currently emotionally available, then there's no point for us to even start dating because you just don't have the capacity right now. So like, just hit me up when you're ready. And if I'm still single, cool, but I'm not about to wait for you because no vacancies, right? So sometimes we don't realize that we had the information that we needed, but we didn't prioritize or give enough importance to the information that we had. Because here's what's true: your instincts are never gonna invalidate what is true. Okay. And so if it's true that he's not ready yet, your instincts are also giving, let's do something else. Right. Every once in a while, the instinct is like, oh, I'm gonna wait. But that is a very clear instinct that's not based on fear of, oh, what if I lose this person? What if this my person and I went and dated somebody else and they end up with somebody else? That can't happen because what's for you is for you. Nobody can keep what's for you from you but you, right? So fear is not with the conversation we had today, fear is not how we make the decision. We still have to look at reason. And if the person just isn't ready, everything else is moot. So that's the first part. But the second thing is, if you're in a situation and your instincts are like, ooh, do this. I'm a proponent of listening the first time, but your instincts don't shut up, right? They're not going to say it once and then not say it again. So you can always be like, ooh, I heard this. Let me write this down. It was this date. If I hear this again, I'm a no sign, right? You can always give yourself let me get a pattern. If my instincts tell me this 2 or 3 times, cool. Like, make a deal with yourself if you need to. But also note, I'm afraid versus I'm feeling pulled. Fear never pulls you in the way that instinct pulls you. Instinct never pulls you to the wrong place. So that's what I would say about that. Cool. Ashley says, sometimes we give people too much grace, although we feel or have the instinct that they aren't ready. You know what? Here's what I find really cool about what you said. You feel that they aren't ready. You have the instinct that they aren't ready. That is also usually really clear. Even if they didn't tell you they weren't ready, sometimes there's a part of you that's like, it's not that they're a bad person. It's not that they don't like me or I don't like them, but it just, if the timing is off, it's a no right now. That's it. Because the thing about instinct is always, if things aren't working fast enough, smooth enough, on time, that means you're not trusting your instincts. Because remember, timing is a function of instinct, right? Acting according to your instinct means you will always act at the right time. There is no wrong time when your instincts are like now. Okay. So yeah, I'd add that. Last week someone stood me up and I ended that night. Yeah, that's no fun. But great news, you ended it. It's just hard to believe at times. Yeah, cool. And then I see another, this masterclass is truly wonderful. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Do you have a few tricks, tips for clearly separating fear from instinct when emotions are high or other factors can cloud judgment? Ooh, yes. Let me go back to these other questions because I think one of these ties into that. So I'm gonna share the screen again and pull that up. So screen sharing in 3, 2, 1, and here we go. Okay. This is going to connect back to this because this is the question we were answering before. But a few tips for separating fear from instinct is literally get a piece of paper, put a line down the middle. Right fear, right instinct. Under fear, say what not to do. Under instinct, what I'm being pulled to do. And list whatever it is that you're feeling. Like sometimes you're feeling multiple things at the same time, and just put each thing in the category, right? I'm feeling afraid that this might happen. Okay, that's a fear. What is the fear telling me? What might happen? Ask yourself that specific question. And if you're like, ooh, they might not like me, they might be cheat, whatever the thing is that you're afraid of happening, ask yourself, what can I do to either prepare for this or avoid this? How can I keep it from happening, or how can I prepare for it in the event that it does happen? Because if we're afraid something bad might happen, the only thing that's going to neutralize that is preparation. If it's a valid fear, right? Sometimes I'm like, I might get bit by a spider, and it's like, what's giving you the indication that you might be? There's no spiders here. Like, we're in the middle of the ocean, right? That's not a valid fear, right? Necessarily. So sometimes it's just checking yourself. What is the thing I'm afraid of? Asking that question often eliminates the fear, because you're like, oh, this was just a misperception. I'm not actually afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. I am just entering a new territory that I'm not used to. And if I've been struggling with love for a long time, love is outside of my comfort zone. So I got to go outside of my comfort zone to get it. And then every time we get uncomfortable, fear shows up, right? Fear is the subconscious signal that, oh, I'm leaving my pattern recognition. I don't have a pattern for this new thing, right? Fear of the unknown, again, is a learned thing. But that's all that fear is telling us. Like, I'm entering unknown territory, not unsafe territory, just unknown. Okay. So that's the best way, the simplest way, the easiest way. Yeah. So the hold on, let me go back to the question, make sure I got everything. Okay, got it. Oh, and I see your message, Ashley. Great having you in case your computer dies. So with that attractiveness, so you know how I just showed you the whole Kolbe R and what the expectations are, they can have a great personality, but shows up they don't meet your expectations, you might feel unattracted because they're not moving the way you want them to move. Okay. So be mindful of that. Sometimes it's just the cute, just not for me. That's also a thing too. Great personality, just not for me. Because everything gotta still add up, right? There's so many different factors that make us attracted and romantically interested or not. Why does overriding your dating instincts almost always lead to romantic stress, struggle, and relationship drama? Ooh, friend, listen. So remember we talked about if it's one or two different low potential for stress, 3 is medium, 4 more high, right? We're talking about that in terms of the expectations we have versus what our partner's instincts are. This is also true for us. If we have to operate just 1 or 2 on either side of our own MO, we won't be stressed, like low potential for stress. 3, we start getting a little stress. 4, more mucho stress. So for me, as someone who initiates in quick start, if I try to resist my instinct to innovate, to improvise, to talk off the top of my head, it's going to stress me out every time. And when you think about this in terms of relationships, so to bring your example back in, Cameron, you stopped listening to your instinct, right? You were going against your instinct, and that then led to stress, right? So there's a level of asking ourselves when we notice an instinct, and then we get the validation that, oh, okay, this came up a couple twice, 2, 3 times, right? If we needed to do that. Okay, I clearly see that this is an instinct. Now let's just test it. I'm going to make a decision now. Either I'm going to follow this instinct or I'm not. I know what the instinct is now. I'm clear that this has come up a couple of times. What am I going to do? And then just see what happens. I chose not to follow the instinct. Did it lead me to stress, struggle, drama? Okay. I chose to follow the instinct. Did it lead me to stress, struggle, or drama? Right. And so doing that, kind of being a little scientific about it, gives you the confidence to trust it more, because confidence is always based on the evidence of our actions. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be confident today. You can't talk yourself into being confident. It's always evidence that gives you confidence. Okay. So testing it out, asking yourself the question, following through with the experiment, seeing where it leads is what's going to give you the best information. And that's what's going to give you the trust. That's what's going to give you the confidence. That's what's going to give you the security that, oh, my instincts be popping. Okay. So it's having that experience of sometimes following, sometimes not, and seeing which led to the best results. But that's why if you override your instincts, it's always going to stress you out. It's just a function of the way instincts work, because they were designed to help you get everything you wanted to have, get everything that you needed to have. And if you aren't following your instincts, you aren't going the most direct path to get your needs and desires fulfilled. So the only other path is stress. How do our instincts determine if we're more likely to go with the flow, and should we even try to do that? So there's a couple of things here. So we mentioned if your instincts are in the middle, or if you're an accommodator, or 4, 5, or 6, you're going to go with the flow as that action mode dictates. So I'm a 5 in fact finder. I'm going to go with the flow of information, right? I'm a 4 in follow through. So I'll also go with the flow of whatever the plan is. Sometimes we think of going with the flow in a relationship like, should I plan the date? Should I ask questions? Should I just like match the other person's energy? And ooh, friends, here's the lesson for that ass. Be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Okay. Your goal in a relationship is to find someone who matches your energy already. But if you have to change yourself to match them, that is an immediate indication that you're going against your instincts. Okay. Changing you to match them is not being you. How can they be in a relationship with you if you have to become somebody else in order to be with them? The math just the math. So that's how that works. But that's different than I naturally accommodate plans. I am being myself when I go with the flow of the plan, right? I am being myself when I go with the flow of the information. But when it comes to ideas, I'm not being myself if I try to turn my ideas off, right? That's how that works. Yeah, so if you're in the middle, you're going to go in the flow with that action mode. But this going with the flow this gives me more thermostat thermometer versus instinctual going with the flow. So just be aware of if you're trying to please the person so that they like you versus even if he wasn't here, I was still going to go with the flow, whatever the planning is. That's how you know it's you. When we understand, we got a couple questions. Okay. When we understand when we're in an unknown territory, how do we calm ourselves down? Ooh, this is such a good question too. So there's a few different things that are happening here. When we go to the unknown, that fear that comes up is the subconscious signal for leaving the front yard, right? You're just leaving the gate. There's a gate here, okay? And if we can remember, this fear is not telling me I'm in danger. This is just telling me I'm in difference right now. I'm in a different place. That's it. Different does not equal deficient. Different does not equal danger. So if we can reasonably say, am I danger here? No. So this is just a response to doing something different. First, we can do that. Then we can literally give ourselves like a hug, put our hands on our chest, and just breathe and tell our inner child, it's okay, you're safe. Like, I can figure anything out. Like, even if I don't know what to do now, all of life is made up anyway. I've survived this long. I can keep surviving. Like, unknowns don't kill you, right? So sometimes it's just giving yourself the grace of acknowledging what you're feeling and not trying to stop yourself from feeling the fear. If you try to turn the emotion off, it's just going to get stronger. You're like polarizing the emotion by trying to force it to stop. But if you acknowledge it and validate it, it usually stops on its own because you're giving it the attention that it needs to be released. And then I see another one. So for those who are more reserved in dating, if I'm at a different energy level, should I not even engage with someone who's more cautious? Ooh, this is a great question, Cameron. This is going to depend on what your expectations of a partner are. So I mentioned I'm a 7 in Quick Start, but we looked at my Kolbe R, my expectations of a partner is that they are on the opposite end, right? And so for me, because my expectation is to be with someone who's more reserved, even though there's a difference in our instinct, the difference is not going to stress me out as much as if they don't match what I need from a partner, right? So there still might be some like conflict, just like, we do things in a different way because you're at the opposite side. But if you match the expectation that I have and I'm at peace with my expectation, then that difference is not cause for not having a relationship with them or not engaging with them. It really depends on the other things first, which is like, are our values compatible? Do they have the capacity to meet the needs that I have, right? Are our attachment styles compatible? Those are more paramount, but once those are all green, then look at your MO, okay? And so, in other words, no, cautiousness doesn't mean don't engage. Emotional unavailability, however, is a deal breaker. Okay. Why don't dating apps work for everybody? And are some apps or apps in general better for certain instincts? I really like this question too. It gets at a few different things. The way that we need things to be in order to operate. So the part of dating apps, I guess I can walk you through the action modes with this, if that's helpful. So for fact finders, I think I should do a masterclass on like dating apps. I think that's probably going to be most helpful. We can look this into. But when you think of like Tinder, for example, you're swiping, there's a profile, there are photos. Tinder is one of my favorite apps because just based on the numbers, it's the easiest to find what you're looking for if you know how to use it. And so the first thing is to recognize is all dating apps are just tools. And if you don't know how to use the tool, you can do some damage. So a lot of times people are like, dating apps don't work, or this app is on some bullshit. And it's like, nah, like if you don't know how to use the app, of course you're not going to use it well, right? Think of a knife. You can slice butter, you can unlock a door, You can poke somebody's eye out. You can accidentally poke yours out, right? And it's the tool isn't the problem. It's your dexterity with the tool that is going to determine your ability to use it well or not. So if you learn how to use whatever app you're going to be on, if you don't become a competent user of the app, it's not going to work well for you. So that's the first step. So we're starting the thinking part of the mind. If you don't know how to use it, it doesn't matter if it's against your instincts or not. Like, you might have the instincts to be a CFO, but if you're 12, you don't have the experience or the education to be a CFO yet. Right? Like, that's the easiest way to think about that. So the other thing is we have to look at preferences in addition to MO here. So I'll use the implementer mode, for example. Hire an implementer, you tend to need to see things, right? You're more tangible, more hands-on. When you're shopping, you're more likely to like try the thing on or go and touch it, be in the house and feel the countertops, right? You're more hands-on. And so a dating app could be cool because of the photos, but you still need to see the person in person before you're like, it's my person or not, right? Also, sometimes if we're hiring an implementer, if we see something that fits what we think it should look like, because we're more tangibly oriented, we can sometimes be like, oh, this is my person. We can be all in because it looks the way it needs to look, even if the stuff on the inside not necessarily there, right? So sometimes looks can be deceiving. That's definitely a higher implementer thing, because we tend to trust the way that things look, the tangible things first. But at the opposite end, when we're 1, 2, or 3, we can often get caught up in our fantasies more. The fantasy can be deceiving, right? So it just depends on how we're using it. If we know that about ourselves, then when we're on an app and we're like, okay, cool. First things first, I'm going to swipe left, which is it's a no for me, on people who clearly say they don't want what I want, or clearly saying things that are in contradiction to what I want, right? So first level of using a dating app is stop investing in people who clearly you're not even on the page enough. You can think of this like job applications. If you're hiring and you got all these resumes, your dating profile is the resume, and you see some resumes, they don't even have the experience. Why would I even bring them in for an interview? They don't have the education, the experience. They're looking for a whole different job. I'm hiring for a bookkeeper and they're applying for like customer service. It's like, what? Like, that's not what I'm looking for, right? So that's the first level. We got to know how to sift and only pay attention to the people that are even in the realm. And what I find with a lot of the clients that I work with is that is usually the problem with the dating app. It's not that the dating app is the problem. It's, why are you swiping on people who are not even, we're wasting time on these people who are not even good candidates for the interview, right? So that's the first step. We got to make sure we're not getting caught up in that piece, or swiping right on people with no pictures, or there's literally one word on your profile. And we talked about, 1, 2, and 3 in Fact Finder being of fewer written words, but fewer words is not pointless words, right? They will get straight to the point versus hi. Like, it's not going to be those one word responses that are annoying. It's going to be, you got all the information you need in those fewer words, as an example. So in other words, dating apps can work for anybody as long as you learn how to work the tool. The second piece is understanding how you work is going to tell you the strategy for using it. So for example, if you are someone who gets more overwhelmed with a lot of choices, right? You might want to implement a rule for yourself. I'm only going to swipe until I have 3 matches max. Once I get 3 matches, I'm going to stop swiping until I talk to these people. Fun fact, all of us, only 8 conversations max is what we can have at a time. So if you have more than 8 matches in your dating apps, and this is across apps, even if you're on more than one app, if you got 8 matches and you haven't had conversations to get them people off your roster, anything else is just a distraction and you're lowering your effectiveness. So sometimes it's not even that, it's not working. We got all these matches, but how come I'm not getting further? It's because you are now spreading yourself too thin and you're not spending enough time getting to know the people that you have matched with before you're moving on to someone else. So all those things can be true, but what is ultimately true is if you've learned how to use the app well and you still don't like the app, then don't use the app. Use something else that you like. Okay. Do what you like, but also make sure you're giving yourself enough education on the tool before you throw the tool away. That being said, some of us, like me, I'm much better speaking. So even if I'm on an app, I'm gonna, like Tinder or any other app that has like a video feature, we might match. I'm like, hey, how about we do a video call? Because then we could just talk, right? So there are ways to think about how can I use this in a way that works for me too. So all those things are going to need to be considered. How can someone work deeper with you if they're interested? And I just copied and pasted these, so I just noticed a little typo, but it's fine. I'll fix it later. The short answer is tomorrow. You're gonna get I think it's tomorrow. You'll get an email that'll have like links to take the Kolbe if you want to take it, to some other assessments to take, and also how to get on my calendar if you want to work with me. So pretty much we do a dating analysis. So we'll look at the level your dating skills are on, because the number one reason anybody's single is because they're trying to have a level 25 relationship with level 3 dating skills. So we talked about like the skill of using a dating app, for example. If you don't know how to use it, you won't use it effectively. You really only need to be at like a level 7 to have the confidence and competence needed to enter into a healthy relationship. But if we have unrealistic expectations, because a level 25 relationship just doesn't exist, but also we don't have adequate skills for what is realistic, it's easy to see why we can struggle in relationships sometimes. So that's one thing that we look at. We also look at your attachment style, and we also look at your Kolbe MO. If you've taken it to really come up with a plan that'll help you to reach your goals. And then if it makes sense for us to work together through that discovery, then we'll talk about what that looks like. So that's the short answer. And you can access that, like I said, at the link in the email tomorrow, or go to my website today and just click work with me and hit the dating analysis. It'll ask you some questions, have you fill out the time, and then go from there. And it's only $200. So we do all of that. It's like an hour situation. But I think in the email tomorrow, you'll get a code to do, and it might be tonight, but because you attended the masterclass, you'll be able to do it. It's like a discount code for the dating analysis consultation. So that's how. And then we covered a lot of things tonight. And we're 8 minutes ahead of time. I see you got some more questions or comments in there. So I'm just glancing to make sure I got everything. Do you have a dating quiz package I can give to potential suitors so I can circumvent wasting my time? Here's what's really cool. The short answer is yes. So we have a compatibility quiz, which is the personality piece of it, and that's lovealchemytest.com. But then the dating skill quiz, datingskillquiz.com. Here's what's true. This is true about communication and dating skills, because communication is also a skill. In a relationship, a lot of times we're like, oh, I want somebody who can communicate effectively. It only takes one person to have great communication skills, effective communication skills, in order for communication to be effective. That's first. So if we struggle with communication, that means both of us is struggling. Okay. So that's the first piece. The same is true with dating skills. If your dating skills are effective, you're going to be able to effectively navigate the dating process. And the other person's skills aren't going to be as important, right? And when I say important, I mean in terms of the success of your relationship. Because if you know how to navigate the relationship, just like if you know how to navigate communication, it's going to be easier to do. Now, this doesn't mean to settle for things that are not compatible with what you want and need. But for most people, level 8 dating skills, level 5 dating skills, like that's not a thing that's on your list of relationship requirements. Because often when we find someone we like, when we find someone we're into, our instincts, again, tell us what is good for us. And so it's not a skills assessment necessarily. Though if you want somebody who can cook really well, you might taste their cooking and see different conversation. But to your point, Cameron, you can't have them take the dating skills quiz. You can't have them take any of the other quizzes that you're going to get in that email. I, for one, think it's always really cool. Like when you're on a date and you're like, I don't know what to talk about, like do one of these quizzes together. It's going to be great for conversation and also learning about the other person in a way that's like attacking, because like you didn't make the quiz. So you're like, I don't know what your result's going to be. It's your answers. We just talking about it. So yeah. Cool. And one more skim, using the apps as a tool today instead of to pass the time changed my interactions with Tinder. Yes. Here's what's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, Travis. A lot of time, and see you later, Karen. Thanks for coming. A lot of time, people will be on dating apps to cope, right? I'm lonely. I want a partner. I'm just here because I don't believe it's going to work out, right? And so we're like coping through the dating app. It's like we're using the app as a surrogate for connection. And this also happens with like hookups, right? Sometimes we use sex as a surrogate for love, right? And so if we can identify the surrogates we're using, we can also identify, oh, I don't believe I can just have the real thing, which is why I'm settling for the knockoff. I can't afford the real relationship right now, so I'm gonna get the knockoff. So we can identify that and give ourselves permission to do whatever it takes. And usually that is developing our dating skills, working on our own emotional management and availability, right? Those things, learning to trust our instincts. If we can do those things, that's going to make it a lot easier for us to get exactly what we want. Because again, when the thoughts, emotions, or actions are all aligned, manifestation is inevitable. And so that's what I help all my clients do: develop their dating skills, heal those subconscious patterns of self-sabotage, enhance your romantic magnetism so that love becomes inevitable, because it is. It's here. It's enough for everybody. And if you know what to do, like, love is easy when you know what to do. So that's what we do. We help clients learn how to let love be easy, because it's only hard if we decide it has to be, and if we don't develop the skills. So yeah, cool. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. If there are no other questions with our last 3 minutes, it's been a pleasure. I hope that you got a lot out of this. I always tell people, like, sometimes people think, oh, it's a free masterclass, no big deal. But I charge for masterclasses sometimes, and I never am like, oh, this is going to be free. I always do all of them like I do all of them, and then I randomly decide which one I'm going to do for free. So, like, as you can see, there was no lack of content in this free masterclass. Okay. So yeah, hope it was impactful, insightful, and it was a lot of information. And what's really funny is I still gave you the essentials. It's a lot more you do it. So yeah, welcome. And if you have questions or anything else you want to work deeper, send us a message. Follow those links in your email, and I hope to see you soon. Right. And in the meantime, whatever happens, I'm sending each of you love, peace, and glitter. Great to see your faces. And that's it for tonight, friends.
Well, thank you. Truly appreciate it. You were great as always. It is good to see you again.
Thank you. Likewise. Great to see your face. Great, great, great. All right, everybody. Thank you all. And I am stopping the thing.